And I see the recording is on, which is good.
Share. Do you see my screen?
I do.
Okay, hold on. Present. How's that look?
Looks good. Yeah.
You can see it?
I
Can I
can.
move to the next slide?
Yep. Agenda.
And you can also see me?
I can. And you're squarely right in the middle of your screen, so it's perfect.
Okay, so I want to go back to the Zoom. Back to meeting. So I'm going to let people in.
Cool.
And I want to get in from my iPad too, so that I can maybe see the hands that way. That's what I was thinking, to have two screens.
Okay. I also make a point to bring it up either verbally or in the chat.
Okay, so how do I, what? Hello, hello. Shit, that's not working.
I think that feedback is from having two open.
Yeah, so how do I let people in? Participants, admit all.
There we go.
All right, see if this worked. I think I see a number of people joining. Does it say how many participants?
It doesn't have the exact number, but I think we're coming close to the 50-person quorum just by eyeballing it. Hey, Ty, I guess we got to watch the waiting room because some more people are trickling in here. Yep.
All right. Well, hey, everyone who's here already, we're just giving it a couple minutes for some stragglers to come in and then we'll get going. Just give us a couple minutes. Hey, Ty, maybe just watch that and we'll get going. But then do you have the ability to admit people from there as well?
Not on my end, by the looks.
But you can see if there's people in the waiting room?
I can tell you the total participant number.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep up. Yeah, there's another one in the waiting room. It doesn't ping me or anything. You guys can tell I'm a real Zoom expert. I should be after this long in quarantine. I'm still not. All right.
I feel like the extra features are just like a different level once you get out of basic usage.
Look at that for you, Anne. That's great.
Right?
You can see into my bedroom. I had to lock the door, so you might hear banging from my crazy kids at some point. But they can't get in. They can't find me. All right.
Jason, you can also change the settings to disable the waiting room for the call.
Oh, I can?
Keep on top of.
Maybe I would love to do that, actually.
Yeah, go to Zoom and preferences.
Okay, I'm in there.
See, it's in here, so I'm not sure exactly.
General, maybe.
This specific meeting.
You might have to click more settings. I'll find it.
Oh, wow. It looks like we're good for now. And if anyone else joins, I'll just try to keep an eye on the waiting room. I don't want to hold people up any longer since we're already 8 minutes in. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? You don't have to all say yes, but maybe just, yeah, the thumbs up or the, I guess there's a little thumbs up in the participant tab as well. There's icons you can use. But thank you very much for coming to the first official MCJ Town Hall. We're going to try to make this a regular thing on a monthly basis. It is, there's someone else in the waiting room. It is our first, so it's a grand experiment. We'd love feedback afterwards on the format or the content or both. We also want it to be interactive, so we can try that. That might get messy, but we're gonna try enabling it. So if you guys have questions along the way, just raise your hand. How does one raise their hand? Just so that I'm not giving people wrong instructions. Items, participants. Does anyone know how to raise your hand?
Yeah, I think it's in the participants tab, and there's a button to raise our hands over there. It's in the middle of the middle bottom of the screen.
Yeah, if you click participants, then you should see 3 options. One of them is raise your hand.
Okay, for some reason I'm not, but as long as you guys do, then that's good. So give a try raising your hand there. If anyone has any trouble raising your hand, just speak up. If it gets bumpy, maybe we'll address that and throw people on mute or whatever, but as long as it's not a problem, I much prefer, if this was in person, I would want it to be very interactive. And so the more interactive we can get it, the better. Yeah, just provided it doesn't get to be chaos. So I did prepare some slides. I am terrible at slides, nor did I put a lot of time into the slides. The most important thing was the content. So the slides are basically just a cheat sheet for me to remember what to talk about. But I do have some slides that I'm gonna thumb through, so I'll share my screen in a moment. Please stop me as we go. If you have questions, I'd like to know about them, and either I will address them on the spot, or if it's something I know we're gonna cover in the later slides, I'll let you know that. I'm gonna try to pop through the material though, the formal material, fairly quickly to leave as much time as possible for Q&A at the end. That's like my living room. I love Q&A. I'm really transparent, and you know, philosophically at MCJ, we have nothing to hide, and so we want to answer any and all of your questions. So the quicker we can get to that part, the happier I am. Any questions or comments before we start, or should we jump into the material? The formal presentation.
Jump in.
Okay, good. Now I need to figure out how to share my screen. I did the dry run on the iPad, and now I'm using, oh, there we go. Now I'm using the desktop. And so of course all the buttons are in different places just to mess with me.
Oh, we see your screen.
Okay, good. Okay, you guys see the MCJ Town Hall front page?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we did introductions. We wanted to just use this opportunity to share a bit about our vision for MCJ, some of the progress that we've made to date, some of the things that we plan on focusing on in the short and medium term, as well as some of the recent developments around the ambassador program that we've been experimenting with and the membership program that we recently rolled out. And as I said, if you guys have questions or comments along the way, feel free to chime in. And then at the end, we can just kind of open it up and talk about anything that you'd like with the remaining time that we have. So the squad itself, it's really I mean, you guys are all the squad philosophically, but in terms of who's, you know, on the books in an employee capacity, it's Ty and I put Evan on there as well because before Ty came on as chief of staff, Evan was the initial chief of staff. I guess we've been doing this long enough now that that we've cycled through. But Evan was great and played a big role in getting this off the ground. And he spread his wings, and now he's actually moved on to be Josh Koppelman's chief of staff at First Round Capital, which is a big upgrade from being the MCJ chief of staff. But it's been awesome to work with Ty as well in the last few months, and excited to keep the ball rolling. He's taking on more and more every day and giving me and MCJ more leverage in the process. So if you've not had a chance to interact with him yet, you will. And Ty, do you want to say hello, since people have probably emailed with you but haven't talked to you?
Yeah, hey everyone. Maybe you recognize me from just being the kind of disembodied identity behind all the MCJ applications and whatnot. Hopefully we'll have, you know, more opportunities to meet one another as we move forward.
Thanks, Ty, and thanks for all your work so far. So I'm just going to pop out and quickly admit a couple people that are locked in purgatory in the waiting room. Okay. Luckily, it flashes when there's people waiting, so I don't need to worry about constantly checking. So I did not mean for this to become a full-time pursuit. My story, and many of you know this, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but you know, I just knew after I was in a fortunate position where I could work on whatever I wanted, and I had a bumpy ride and a really fortunate ending in terms of, you know, getting our last company acquired successfully. And I knew how much luck and privilege and good fortune went into that. And it very easily could have gone the other way, and almost did. So it was almost like survivor guilt. I just wanted to really make my next chapter about purpose. And I couldn't think of something much more purposeful than climate, both in terms of, I think it was the ratio of like how behind we are, or how important it is to how behind we are, right? And so I just really worried about that. And it feels like a luxury, as many of you know, to the flexibility to worry about and think about long-term problems. And so it's like, if not us, who, right? Because many people would love to care about this, but are caring about, you know, things like how do they feed their children tonight, and where are they going to sleep, and stuff like that, especially now with the pandemic and such horrible unemployment numbers. But yeah, I just came in as a learner and started talking to lots of people, and people were really welcoming. That's the great thing about this climate community. And they were introducing me more people to talk to. So, and they wanted to be kept posted on my progress. So I started the newsletter. Then as I'm sending out the newsletter every week, more and more people from my old Silicon Valley life started raising their hand and wanting to head down a similar path. So they would say to me, what should I do? And I would say, well, I wish I could tell you what to do, but if I knew what to do, I'd be doing it. But gosh, I'm learning so much and having a blast, having all these great discussions. I wish you could be a fly on the wall. They're really helping me figure it out. So the pod was just that. It was like a knowledge repository for those that came after me. And as the pod was rolling, then my inbox started filling up with people like you guys. And so that was a sign to me and Evan at the time that we were really onto something and that it was working. We were getting all these testimonials and success stories of people that were getting a lot of value from the pod. So it was like, wow, this community is amazing, but nobody knew about each other. And there was a little bit of interaction on Twitter or through email with me, but I was like the telephone operator where it was like, you would talk to me and I would tell you, go talk to someone else. But people didn't have a way to really get to know each other, especially with the diverse group that had been forming around MCJ. So the Slack room was just essentially a way to stick everybody in the same digital room and see what happens. It was just an experiment, like a lot of what we've been doing. And then the Slack room, as you guys know, has taken on a life of its own. And there's all kinds of awesome things that are happening there and organically. And it's just kind of scratching the surface of what could be. So when I started, it was like, this was my journey to figure out what to do. But I think what's becoming clearer and clearer to me every day is that like what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so now I just need to figure out a way to keep doing it. Some other points on this slide before we move on. I think one is just that, like one reason I think that, and who's ever typing, if you don't mind, just I'm hitting mute because there's some background noise. But let's see. Oh yeah, one is just that I came in as a newcomer, so I could ask all the dummy questions that other newcomers might want to know, but either are afraid to ask or don't have the platform to ask. But the other is that because we don't have a horse in the race, we don't have a specific technology or company or nonprofit, or, we don't need advanced nuclear to work or long duration storage, or, we're just in search of the truth. And I think that objectivity has enabled us to build trust across stakeholders that don't always find themselves, in the same room collaborating in this way. And so it's just the beginning, but that's just something that gives me a lot of encouragement about what MCJ could ultimately be.
Hey, Jason, can you just mute everyone?
Oh, yeah.
And then you can unmute as needed.
How do I, participate? Oh, mute all. Great. Why does that not work?
There you go.
Okay. Much better. Jesus. I hate Zoom. I don't hate Zoom, but okay. So from what I can see, and you guys might have a different view, but there's 4 characteristics that the people in the MCJ community seem to have in common. One is a determination to tackle the problem of climate change. The second is ambition to work on the most impactful solutions. We don't just want some lip service and some feel good so that we can go about doing whatever it is that we're doing. We're serious about really having an impact. We're also optimistic that we can have an impact if we try, which for whatever reason, there's some factions in the climate community that are a lot more pessimistic than that, which even if they're right, I don't necessarily feel like is a productive life philosophy. And I also don't believe that they're right, by the way. That's my personal view. And the last is a collaborative spirit. And that is probably the one that I'm most proud of when you look at the values of the MCJ community, that people really come in like we're all on the same team. And you would think intuitively as humans that that's the way that most communities would be, but I think if you just look at the news in the last week, there's a lot of evidence that the rest of the world, for whatever reason, isn't necessarily operating that way. And so the fact that we have this little bastion of determination, ambition, optimism, and collaborative spirit, like, I think is really special, and would like to cultivate that and harness it and kind of nurture it to be everything that it can be, because that is a hard thing to get. This is another thing. This actually came up this week, and I can tell you why. But the goal of MCJ has not been to convert anyone to a specific worldview as it relates to the nature of the problem and the best ways to solve. It's really to enable each person to form their own worldview from a more informed position, and then provide people with tools and resources to pursue the solutions that you believe in. that's a really important one for me. And hopefully you found that philosophically in the discussions that I've had on the podcast as well, where, you know, it's not like, oh, because I believe that, you know, that a price on carbon would be helpful, that if you don't believe a price on carbon could be helpful, this community is not for you. Or, you know, I believe in 100% renewables, you believe in, you know, nuclear, and therefore, like, we can't coexist. I very much want this to be a place where, you know, people that believe that you know, that policy is most important, and big government, people that believe that free markets are the answer. Like, if you share those 4 values that I talked about before, there's a place for you in this community. And I want to be very careful as we grow, you know, to not get into pushing people to feel a certain way or believe a certain thing, but more just try to help get to the truth. So if there's something that we're consistently hearing in the community that contradicts itself, rather than steer people that feel one way that they should be feeling another, it's like, let's take people with opposing viewpoints and let's talk it out, and let's do it in public and see what happens. Yeah. And if you look at kind of the flywheel of community, right, these things that we have are essentially an MVP. And for anyone that doesn't necessarily come from the software or product world, MVP just means minimum viable product, meaning that, like, the pod is just a subset of how you could ultimately be delivering and enabling knowledge consumption. But it's a subset that I think has proven that, like, there's an appetite for knowledge consumption. And same thing with the newsletter around curation and discovery, right? Like, it's, you know, it's all right. It's getting a little better week over week. Hopefully we're trying. It's not as easy as it looks on TV, but there's a lot more that we could do to kind of step up our game with a whole portfolio of offerings around discovery and curation. And, you know, the Slack room, same thing. It's kind of an MVP of a place to congregate and a way to congregate, but there's a whole host of ways, big ways, small ways, one-on-one ways, big group ways, small group ways, et cetera, you know, that we could foster collaboration and community over time. And the Slack is just like a little proof of concept. And I think the good news is that from these, like, little hacked together beginner assets, we're getting a ton of validation. You know, we get inbound success stories literally every day, most days, multiple times a day, from people that are just filled with gratitude that this community exists. And although the community has not been making any money, so by my old world way of measuring of, you know, because my whole career has been in business, it has not been a good business, but it's been incredibly fulfilling just in terms of having a real impact on the problem. Another data point that has told me that, or helped me show me that we may be on the right track, is that word of mouth has been a huge growth driver for us. I'd say the vast majority of people that come and request access to the community are people that heard about it from one of you. And that's been an amazing thing. We don't take that for granted. That's really hard to do. You know, that's a hard thing to get, natural organic word of mouth, and an easy thing to screw up. And gosh, like, we know how hard that is to get, and we do not want to lose that. And the way to not lose that is not to, you know, hold people captive. It's to breed trust and deliver real value. And, you know, we hope to do that at every step of the way as we grow. Again, easy to say, super hard to do. There's also been a big appetite from the community to volunteer. So I'll talk a little later on in the presentation about the ambassador program that we've been experimenting with. My dream is that this platform and ecosystem is big and strong and robust, but as an entity, MCJ is not. We should be small and lean, and we should be like connective tissue that fosters a bunch of big heavy lifting to be done from all kinds of places outside of the community. And we can help enable it, but for the most part, just stay out of people's way. Give them what they need, support them, but like a healthy functioning community, especially with as daunting of a system, you know, of a global systems problem as this, you know, across industries, across geographies. I mean, really decarbonizing our entire global economy, like me and Ty are not going to do that. So if we're going to be successful, we need to create an atmosphere and breed trust and provide tools and resources and, you know, and organizing principles, et cetera, such that collectively we foster an environment that people are working on this from all walks of life, all over the place, consumers, elected officials, industry, capital, et cetera, And MCJ can, we don't need to be the only facilitator, but if we're some thin glue in the middle that's kind of like juicing the whole system, then we're doing our job. The membership base, it's only been 2 weeks, and we're certainly not, going to retire on a beach anytime soon with the, with the subscription revenue. It's not coming close to covering the costs of operating, but it's been a really powerful signal how many existing members have been subscribing, and especially given that the Slack room is for members only going forward, but we're not, at least not right away, we're not booting out anyone who's been in there historically, but a lot of those people are volunteering to pay, even though today, before the membership offering is built out, Slack room is probably a big piece of the value. It's not the only piece, but it's probably the one people are paying for the most, and a lot of the people paying already have it, and they're choosing to pay because they're getting so much value from it, which really, makes the little hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The other thing is that close to half of the initial paid members are founding members, meaning you guys are paying more than we asked you to pay because you choose to, because you're getting so much value from the community. So again, it's early. We have a lot of work to do, but like these are some powerful early signals that I don't take lightly at all, and that give me huge encouragement to keep doing the hard work going forward. I just figured out, so I suck at slide presentation, but if you take this iPad pen and you just open a note and you draw, you can turn that into a slide, and it takes like 2 seconds. So that literally changed my life. Like animations and graphics, and like that is not my forte, but that's just a little aside. But you can see like that MVP that I showed you, that kind of represents this community in the middle. But if we do it right, when the community wants to find jobs, right? Like ultimately, I'm not talking about tomorrow, but like in the long vision, like we put a little few jobs in the newsletter now, but like, there's a whole, like there could be like a whole systematic effort around connecting employers with people that want to transition into working on climate change or transition within the climate community. Same thing with knowledge, right? Like you would do these audio podcasts, but there's a big tax around 45-minute or 1 hour listening, and not everyone has like a car commute or a situation that's conducive to podcasts, and some people just don't like the format. It doesn't resonate with them, but they would love to read, or they would love to participate in things in person, or they would love things in snippet form, or it's maybe 5 minutes here or there, or to go to a structured conference or panel discussion or things like that, right? So there's a kind of a whole wave of things that we could do to scratch that knowledge itch. Climate candidates, right? Like how do you define a climate candidate, and what are the key elections, and where are we with the big political machine, and what's happening on the other side of the aisle from whichever one you're on, and where's the action at? Is it federal? Is it state? Is it local? Like we think we could play a role in helping answer those questions for people, but then also connect them to bring their ideas to life if they want to find candidates to back, or ways that they can get involved either with their time or with their capital. There's a lot of aspiring founders, current founders, or business leaders running established companies in the MCJ community, and there's a number of tools and resources that they could benefit from. Capital is one. They could benefit from an accelerator program. They could benefit from a peer group of other climate startups that are going through it at the same time as them. They could benefit from mentorship and access to domain expertise on demand when they have specific problems or questions, or need people to help them diligence technology, for example. I think there's a whole web of events, big events, small events, public events, private events, general events, topic specific events, et cetera, that could be really valuable. Same thing with pairing co-founders, or pairing nonprofits with potential donors. I could go on and on and on, and we don't necessarily have a clear roadmap for which things we'll tackle, or how we'll tackle them, or what order we'll tackle them. We're just at the beginning of this journey. But that was one of the reasons why we wanted to transition to a paid membership model, is that if we had a smaller group of people that are more invested and committed to being part of this, then we could work with them to help figure that stuff out, and we'd know we'd have their buy-in because they're collaborators from the start. In order to do that, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of trust, and it takes a lot of collaboration. And I'm much more interested in that approach, where we're kind of building it one brick at a time, than if we try to build like a media company with Joe Rogan like scale or something around the podcast, right? Like I don't care about scale for scale's sake. I care about impact. So if the best way to have impact is to work with a smaller group, that's what we'll do, to the point that we feel like we've cracked the code with a smaller group and we can expand to a larger group to have a larger impact, then that's what we'll do. But impact will be our North Star every step of the way. Should I keep going, or any questions so far? That's a dangerous thing to ask with 30 participants on the call. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So as I talked about, community is key. It's about serving more people. It's about serving them better. It's about serving them more comprehensively. So in other words, as one goes about their journey, maybe the pod is good as like an intro course on, geothermal technology or carbon pricing or, climate activism or something like that. But you don't leave there as an expert. You leave there getting introduced to a topic you want to learn a lot more about. And today you're just cast out into the wild, right? And so like, what are the other things you need as part of that journey? And that's back to that kind of platform slide I was showing before. We don't just want to serve people better around the things we're already doing, but we also want to serve them in more ways over time. And the way we'll measure our ultimate success is collectively, what kind of impact is this community having on the problem? Now, that being said, in order to have the kind of impact we want over the long haul, it needs to be sustainable, and it takes, sorry, I'm just letting in a participant. It takes resources. So we do need to have a business model associated with it, but the business model is fueled to have more impact, not the other way around. So in terms of priorities going forward, so we want to improve the things that we, that we've got already. We want to empower the community to create and not just consume. Now, the good news is that we're not bringing you guys that idea. You've already been doing that. Like the study groups, the book clubs, improving the onboarding flow, having the Airtable for the directory of all the members coming in, the San Francisco meetup that happened, the New York dinner and meetups that have happened, like the Boston meetup that happened, the hard problems workshop that we just did with IDEO with 15 people as an experiment that we're hoping to roll out in a broader way. Like all these things, and there's countless more examples. Like that's you guys. Like we just showed up, but like you guys are actually doing the work. So what we want to do is figure out, how do we get more systematic about that? How do we get more structured about that? And how do we enable it to flourish, not from a policing standpoint or from a like pride of ownership or territory standpoint, but more from a like, we want this to be successful and we don't want you guys to feel like you're hanging in the breeze. Number 3, partnerships. So I mentioned the IDEO partnership, but we think there's opportunities to go into a number of other areas, like I was saying before. And we're not going to get very far if the core MCJ team is doing everything. And I think relying on volunteers, like the people from within the community, is a critical part. But I also think there's an opportunity to work with some more established organizations that do this for a living to bring some bigger, more structured, higher caliber things to bear that wouldn't be realistic to do, nor would it be fair to ask of a team of volunteers. And we'd like to do more of that over time as well, to give you guys some deluxe types of picks and shovels, if you will, that you couldn't otherwise access, that'll be invaluable on your journeys. And the last piece is just, we need a way to fund this effort. So then that gets back to the membership model, and that will hopefully give us an engine so that as we get more money, we can get more resource. And as we get more resource, we can have more impact. And then as we get more impact, we add more value and we get more money, and it just creates this virtuous cycle. And then I have a slide for each one of those. So for improving what we've got, that means, like the Slack community, we have a Slack community, it's vibrant, but if we just leave it to its own devices, it's going to be like a garden that if left unattended for long enough over time, it gets unwieldy. So like, should we clean up the channels? Should we have a better onboarding flow? Should we have a directory experience that, number one, is up to date, because there's only 200 something names on there in a 700 something person Slack community. But also, is there a better experience than Airtable to be more integrated so people can get more value from the directory and utilize it as part of their experience? There's a should Slack be our long-term technology platform? I mean, that's a big question, right? So just thinking about community more holistically, and now that we know that the community is at the center of where we're investing over time, we need to put a lot of thought into how to improve the experience for community members and how to make that offering more robust over time. We also want to continue to increase the caliber of the pod, both in terms of the caliber of the guests and the caliber of the discussions. We'd like the newsletter to be of enough value that some people might, their entree to MCJ might just be to subscribe to the newsletter. Today, I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like it's mostly people that are in the Slack, listening to the pod, getting value already. And so they begrudgingly agree to sign up for the newsletter so that you stay informed on the things you actually care about. Like, we think there's an opportunity for the newsletter to have enough value over time that people look forward to getting it. Maybe some of you do, but I worry and fear that a lot of you don't in its current form. And last, we want to experiment with new formats of content delivery. So that might be in-person events, that might be pitting two people with opposing views and sorting through it publicly, like I said. That might be experimenting with, like, Sparkly is a good example, that like just pairs people with that from within the community that care about things that they care about. Like, we want to be at the forefront of finding new tools that bring value to the community and integrating them in a thoughtful way that improves the experience for everybody. And we'd like that to be an ongoing thing. On the community creation side, so the MCJ Ambassador Program is brand new. So it essentially started out informally as just a group of 15 people when Nicole from within the MCJ community just put out a request and said, if people want to help, like, send me a note. And so people reached out. We've got this group of 15 initial people, and we're currently trying to define a model for when people want to volunteer. Hey, I raise my hand, I want to help with MCJ. What do I do? Right? And our answer today is whatever you want, right? You feel empowered. We're not policing. And on one hand, that is empowering because people feel like, hey, like, this is great. Like, they're telling me no rules, right? But on the other hand, I feel like, and I've heard that, people could benefit from some structure of like, well, where are you heading with MCJ? And what are you working on? And are there initiatives that you've got that I could work on with you, as opposed to just starting from new and doing something from scratch where I can maybe have a bigger impact collectively with a group of people from within the community? So we're currently thinking through that and going to try to shape it over time such that not only can we make this initial group productive, but we can use that as a foundation to have a big, far-reaching volunteer network over time. And then I talked about the ecosystem, right? I mean, we want to play nice with everybody, and we don't know exactly what that means, but just in spirit, if there's an organization out there that's doing something, even if it's doing something similar to what we're doing, like, our approach is not territorial, we want to be a good neighbor because collectively we're just trying to have an impact on the problem. That's why we built this in the first place. So again, exactly what that means, I don't know. That's more of just kind of a philosophical tenet. And the last piece on community is just trust. Trust is a very hard thing to cultivate and an easy thing to lose. And we're very grateful that all of you have, trusted us so far and are willing to invest to see that we're going to turn this into something, have the chance to turn this into something special over time. But now we need to deliver, and we need to do it in the way where people feel like they're included in that process, and that this is getting built, for you, and that you're not just kind of funding us to go build something for somebody else down the road. In terms of those bigger partnerships, I wanted to talk a bit about the IDEO one because that just happened this week. So there's a few members of the IDEO collab that are in the MCJ Slack room and had been actively listening to the pod. The collabs, they're essentially like places it's like this kind of process of identifying problems and then prototyping and then ultimately seeing the light of day in conjunction with this big group of member companies that IDEO works with. And Climate is not currently in a collab, but they have a futures collab that is like a lab for potential collabs that could graduate out of the lab and become their own. And so Climate is like a pup that's in the futures lab. And so they wanted to do a hard problems workshop to get to know Climate better and to get a sense for whether it might have enough legs to graduate and get funded as part of, become its own grown-up collab. And so we grabbed a group of 15 people from within the MCJ community, almost all of whom have been guests in the past and came from a very diverse set of backgrounds, all of which had been, working in climate for quite a while. And we did one of these workshops. It went great. We are still writing up our output and determining next steps, but we're trying to figure out, how could we make something like that accessible to more of the MCJ community? What would that process look like? Is it selection based? Is it open to everybody? Does it get delivered in person? Does it get delivered remotely? What's IDEO's role in that? We don't have any of those answers, but that's the kind of thing that we would love to make available to members over time. There's another example. So Eliza from within the MCJ community, she, and I don't know if you're on this call, Eliza, but she,
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Eliza.
Hi.
So I'll talk, but then feel free to chime in with your color. But actually, no. Why don't I stop talking for a moment? Eliza, do you want to share a bit about what we're talking about and working on?
Sure. In 157 days, we have a really big election. It's kind of the elephant in the room, and many people agree. I think it's pretty easy to say that electoral politics are a huge lever on climate action. That said, it's nuanced and messy and personal and partisan, oftentimes, partisan seeming at least, to get involved politically. So one thing I work a lot on, my background is in science, but I now work kind of at the intersection of climate and politics. And one of the things I work on is trying to chart kind of a no-brainer path to get politically involved, specifically to advance climate action. So kind of what are no-brainer races that don't, nothing about comparing apples to apples and details on policy and nuclear versus not, like comparing apples to doorknobs, like no-brainer races that pit a climate champion against someone with a clear record of voting as a climate obstructionist. So I'm kind of trying to chart a course that ditches the partisan paradigm in climate politics, which is obviously so often part of the framing, and instead just creates a new framework to think about politics in a really clear-cut way. If climate action is your number one goal, where do you engage? Where are those no-brainer races? Is there a way to make, and this kind of began when I was looking around at the community of climate scientists, and I'm a geoscientist, and they're all saying, oh man, we got to do more. Oh man, the problem's not science, the problem's political, but I don't want to get involved in politics. So what would it look like to get engaged in politics in the name of climate action in a non-inflammatory, really inclusive way? Kind of what is really the range of strategies coming from both sides of the aisle, really coming from a broad spectrum in terms like electoral strategies in the name of climate action? And can MCJ be part of an exploration of that and lay out the range of strategies for this particular upcoming election if your goal is climate action, and then empower members to engage and make a kind of really meaningful and like punch above your weight contribution to elect candidates who are going to definitely move on our issue.
So we'll share more details, and we haven't officially green lighted that we're going to do something there, and we're still working through all the details. But I think that's just another example where, if we see partner opportunities where there's a key area for climate action, where there's a partner that can both give us another set of hands, but also a complementary skill set that we couldn't produce on our own, that we think will bring value to all of you and make membership more valuable in the process, which is valuable to us, then we would like to explore those opportunities to offer on an optional basis to members. And that might look like a hard problems workshop. That might look like better understanding the climate voting landscape. That could look like a wide range of topics, and nor do we have a roadmap or do we have criteria. But I think philosophically, that's a direction that feels exciting to us, because it means helping people on their journey across more of the things they care about. Ultimately, looking at your retirement portfolio, or figuring out your job, or figuring out where you do your philanthropy, or how to vote, or what to do with your home, or you can lay out all, and at some point we will get systematic about laying out kind of the key points where people need help, and we'll get your input on that as well, so that we're delivering things that add the most value to the widest chunk of the community that we've got. And I basically covered this, that just paid memberships are the economic engine that funds our expansion. I wrestle with this a little bit because we want to remain inclusive. Like, we're trying to solve this problem and we need more and we need more, you know, at the same time, if we want to have the biggest impact we can, like, we need to stay around and we need to actually be able to put some resource to it. So we're going to try to figure out how to thread that needle as we go. We're definitely not trying to, you know, build some massive business or something, but we are trying to have a massive impact. And so, you know, finding a way that we can build impact one brick at a time, you know, combined with a sustainable model feels like it's very important. So ways that you can help, and then we'll leave the last 15 minutes or so to Q&A. You know, become a member if you haven't already. Get involved, right? Just like being active in the community makes the community more valuable for you, for others, and for new participants coming in. We love feedback, big feedback, small feedback, criticisms, compliments, requests for future direction, you know, things that you're really enjoying and would like to see more of, whatever it is, big or small, topic requests, guest requests. And the last piece, as I said, is just like, tell us what would be most helpful for your climate journey. It's a cheat sheet in a way, but I think that's the beauty of, you know, building something for people directly, is that they can, you know, you can tell us what you want. And with a big disparate group of people, you're not all going to agree, so we can't do everything. But I think that feedback and keeping a pulse on what the community needs as we grow is going to be fundamentally important. And a couple fun slides at the end. I mean, one is just, I think about the Steve Jobs quote a lot, that, you know, that you can't connect the dots looking forward, that you, you know, but in hindsight, it makes so much sense, right? I feel like that a lot. Like, I never would have predicted this is the path that I was on. And even today, with this point in time snapshot, it might look a little less crazy than it did a year and a half ago when I started, but it's still like, you know, not something that my parents are gonna, you know, be psyched about talking about at a cocktail party or something. But it feels very much like the right thing. And in hindsight, the dots are going to connect. I believe that. And last is just that we're going to keep it weird. The one on the left, that is me in 2009 running the marathon dressed as a giant iPhone with my company's app, Runkeeper, on the screen. And it was like something that the big companies that we competed with would have never done, like Nike. Like, they were just so stuffy and corporate. So we did crazy stuff. And like, that ragtag spirit, I will never lose. So like, if you're looking for boring and stuffy and packaged, then I don't recommend this community. But if you want to have fun with it and like try some things and be bold and, you know, have fun with it and don't overthink it and take risks. You know, I think that's kind of our spirit, and we'll see what happens. So with that, what questions do you guys have, if any? And you can either raise your hand or you can just ask.
I had a quick question about membership and about inclusivity. So do you imagine there would be maybe a scholarship process for someone who wants to be involved at the member level, but maybe can't afford it? Maybe people of color, people, you know, any sort of scholarship ideas around that?
I think we're still working our way through it. And actually it just came up this week because we had a few people ask if there was any type of student membership, and we had, you know, some requests from people that you know, that are unemployed or things like that. And I think we're inclined to be inclusive. Where I wrestle a little bit is who is MCJ for? And what I mean by that is that on the one hand, we have some people in the community that are really focused on like moving the needle at a systems level and like high octane, and would probably pay, you know, 20 times the membership fee that we're asking today. And that would give us resource to do like some really kind of industrial strength things. And then on the other hand, you have like high school kids that care about climate, right? You know, I kind of feel like we're somewhere in between. And so that's why I like the price point of like, you know, it feels like a pretty entry level pricing point from a community standpoint. But gosh, if there's people in the community that are students and don't have gainful employment, or that are, you know, down on their luck, like, we don't want to exclude. So, you know, we had told a couple students earlier this week that we would do 50% off of membership on a student basis. We're treading carefully because, you know, whatever we do in these early days and with these early decisions becomes precedent. And so sometimes if you don't properly think through them, you can back yourself in a corner where you make a mess down the road because you haven't properly thought about it from all the different perspectives. And so we're more inclined to give it a little time and be thoughtful and roll out the right policy than to roll something out in haste and then change our mind in a month. Yeah, but what do you recommend?
I haven't thought about it. I just threw out the question. I think you're right in terms of understanding who the community is for, right? Like if it's going to be overloaded with students who maybe are just starting off versus people who are on your podcast and have 10, 20, 50 years of experience. I think that's a question that, and I'm new to the community, so I don't have a lot of good thought on that, but I think the way you're thinking about it makes a lot of sense.
Well, thank you. Well, feel free to let me know as you get into the community longer if you have more thought, and we'll keep you posted as well. I think one of the things you'll find about this community is when we roll out decisions, we don't just roll out decisions, we roll out explanations of behind the decisions and how we got there and why we're thinking about it, how we are, and if it's something that we aren't sure, we might say like, hey, we're going to try it this way, but we don't know if it's right, so it might change again. We try to do anything or everything in a transparent way, for better or for worse. And welcome to the community, by the way.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Comments? Reasons why you joined the community? Hopes and dreams that you're hoping to get out of it? Things you're excited about from the presentation? Directions you hope we don't go?
Jason, I have a question. Instead of student memberships, have you thought about corporate memberships? As an example, I'm CEO of a solar company. We have about 60 employees. Looking at ways to get more of our employees involved. Something that we could do, at a broad scale where I could just, get a lot of people easily involved with the community.
Yeah, I think the truth is that we see endless possibilities, but we see endless possibilities in so many different directions that the same entity wouldn't pursue all of them. The same entity needs to choose a path. And rather than make those decisions this early on with so little data, we said, why don't we crawl, walk, run, and let's just get a membership model in place for the members that are already here and already getting value and charge a pretty modest membership rate to them. But that then takes our head out of a vice. So it gives us a little time to be more thoughtful about some of these longer term decisions, and we can keep building and adding value and maybe experiment in some different places, like with corporates, like with broader consumers, like with, with investors or whoever, and then see what feels best, and then kind of make the decisions as we go. But I agree that we've had some other requests for corporate, and that's certainly a direction we could go. We're just not sure yet if it's the one that we will
go. Thank you for that. Yeah, that sounds good. And
yeah, and great to hear that you have interest in that. I think that that's an example of some early validation that it warrants further exploration. I think I'm a little cautious to be choosing paths right now because I think that we can learn a lot from doing small experiments across some different paths to inform our decision making.
Hey, Jason, this is Sam. Thank you for this wonderful community. And also my apologies, I had to step away in the middle because of a work call, so I may have missed some detail. But the thing that excites me about this community is that there's so many professionals who are looking to self-educate and looking to share what they know with others. And I'd be super interested in anything that looked like really focused, serious professional education, which, frankly, the podcast is, and some of the materials in Slack, so it's all going well. But I can give you two examples. One is I'm a software guy, and I've been developing a talk on, if you are a junior software engineer, how do you get power in your career to do the work that you care about? Like, how do you, as a practical matter, what are the steps that it takes to become you know, an engineer at a clean tech company? How do you get them to hire you instead of somebody else? That's one example. Another example would be in my previous clean tech job. I learned a little bit about how California's ambitious climate goals intersect with the need to develop new kinds of software, and how does the state actually adopt policies that allow clean tech companies to, you know, exert some leverage. I'm looking from the community for more ideas like that about specific detailed markets where there's sort of intense professional education and networks of people that you're bringing together that can give me stuff that I just couldn't find otherwise. Does that make sense?
It does, and one of the things we're thinking through and would love you guys' input, or you know, over time, and so selfishly, I'm planting a seed for you guys to leave with and wrestle with is think about like the iPhone, and think about the native Apple apps, the camera app and the App Store app and the music app and things like that, and then think about the thriving third-party ecosystem, and thinking about and then look at this community where like the podcast that's like a native app, right? And the study group or some of the panel discussions that I've been having, those are kind of more like you know, that's coming from within the community, right? And so and then like the IDEO thing is kind of a hybrid, right? That's like a collaboration that you know, that's like the Apple and Nike partnership, right? And so as we scale, there's no question that those examples you just thought of, if we sat down with this group, we could probably find hundreds of those examples of modules that would be valuable. How do those get populated? And which ones come from us? And which ones come from you? And which ones come from collaborations, right? Like that's the kind of thing that gets me really excited to think about directionally. I don't have answers right now, but I think, I mean, that's a vision that, you know, just speaking personally, I could get really excited about over time. Not
Awesome,
necessarily to
thanks.
make money, by the way. You know, it doesn't
Sure.
necessarily need to be like people buy stuff, but just when you look at the type of ground that needs to be covered and the types of answers that people need and the diverse situations that people need it, like there's no way that, you know, that I don't feel like one company and team can do it all, right? And plus that's just knowledge, right? Like people need a lot of other things besides just knowledge. Well, how do we facilitate the most stuff getting done? And I'm more concerned with facilitating the most stuff getting done than I am with us doing the most stuff, if that makes sense.
Hey, Jason, so you've got the pod, you've got the newsletter, you've got Slack, obviously you've rolled out membership. Like, what are you most excited about next?
Yeah, I would say what I'm most excited about next, you know, while it's great seeing the membership dollars come in and starting to get, you know, a little bit of revenue for the first time, so we're not just hemorrhaging my savings continually. I'm actually less concerned with member growth, to be honest, and more concerned with making sure that as new members come in, that not only is the caliber of the experience for the existing community not degraded, but that it continues to get better. Because I feel like if we get that right, then we'll have a more solid foundation to build on, and word of mouth will be stronger, and filling the top of the funnel will be an easy problem to solve. Whereas if we grow too quickly and it gets messy and messes things up, you know, slowly over time for people, then it's a road to nowhere. It might be a slow death, but it's not, you know, it's either going to be capped in terms of the impact it can ultimately have, or, you know, or we're not going to make it. And sometimes it's just about kind of cleaning up what you've got. So I'm eager to take on more things for sure, but it kind of feels like we need to have a solid foundation first. And right now we have you know, what we have is good, but it's not necessarily set up to scale. And that's what we need to figure out.
That's sort of how do you open up membership while maintaining community, I guess, is sort of the formula you need to figure out over the next 6 months, probably.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of things that are paperclip together that are very manual today that won't scale if you add a 0 to the number of members in the community, right? And so, or 2 zeros, right? And so, you know, how do we tighten up the ship such that we have a well-oiled machine that's kind of on autopilot, right? And we're a long way from autopilot. So it isn't necessarily going to take a lot of time and resource to figure those things out, but like getting the ambassador model right, for example, very important, right? Because that, if you can get it right with 15 people, then maybe one day you could have 1,000 people, right? But like, you need a model that works, and you don't get a model that works by getting 1,000 people in the room with a whiteboard. You get a model that works with 15 people, and you do a pilot and you make some changes until you feel like you get it right, and then you slowly start to let more people in. But it's that type of model that's going to enable us to have the biggest impact as a community, not necessarily about MCJ figuring out how to grow our headcount from 2 to 10. We are up, we did hit our hour mark. I don't have a hard stop, so anyone that wants to stay and chat, you're welcome to stay and ask more questions. I also don't want to keep anyone, so if you need to make a graceful exit, that's perfectly fine. And if we're out of questions, that's fine too.
This is kind of piggybacking off of what Sam was kind of talking about, is like kind of entering the industry from the software side. Just want to, get your thoughts on like how we can kind of, we've got a lot of people in the community that are new to the community. We also have some people that are in there that are experts. And how do we kind of connect the two to kind of like, I know some of these experts are leading, really meaningful companies or real meaningful endeavors, but how do we kind of get, leverage them to kind of figure out what the next thing to build is, I guess, or like what's the, I think a lot of times when you ask those questions at the end of the podcast, you get a lot of very super big concept ideas, but like, how do we get those more actionable, I guess?
Yeah, one of the things I'm thinking about is, that's a perfect example. Now, is it better that me and Ty go sit and discuss that, right? Or is it better to take to say, Nicolo, that's a great idea. Why don't you take that and own it and go do an exploration and come back with a recommendation, right?
Sure.
Or is it some hybrid where it's like, well, maybe we get some interns I don't know, but I think that's a great area to explore. I think there's so many of those, right? And then It's like, how do we prioritize?
Sure.
And what are the most impactful ways for us to spend our time? But I think, to your point though, that connective tissue, that's the secret sauce of like creating connective tissue that doesn't exist. And we don't have to look far. Like, more connective tissue for who's already in the community would go miles. We just need to be thoughtful about how to bring that out, right? And I'm very open to feedback and suggestions if you have ideas or reactions as we try stuff, but that's definitely an area where we will be investing some time and doing some experimentation.
Cool.
And if you want to help, tell us that too, and we can have an exploratory call and try to figure out how to get you involved.
Great.
Yeah. Just scrolling to make sure I'm not missing anybody.
I'm gonna chime in just like to say, first of all, a huge thank you for what you built. I mean, like, can you imagine if someone hadn't stepped up to do this? It's huge. It's huge. I mean, it's huge. And, the way you've done it so gracefully and just kind of like taken the religion out of all of this, and we're all coming together, and the religion is the problem solving on this one big problem, and come at it from every angle. And I really respect the way you've done it. And I'm just like humongously grateful. I also wonder, and this is just a suggestion, what about having these town halls with higher frequency than once a month, and having, a more also of like a workshopping component. So you can throw out kind of ideas pertaining to the growth of the MCJ community that you might want some feedback from the community on, and just kind of have a place to have those conversations. I mean, you probably hear many more ideas than you're interested in, but I don't know, just a thought. This has been really interesting to be up close to your thinking on all of it. And there's so much in the brain trust of the community. Certainly so many people have thought through these things from all different perspectives. So just throwing this out, but this was really an interesting deep dive.
Yeah, one of the tricky things is that this is a very similar deep dive to what we just had with the ambassador group, but like, you guys are all ambassadors, whether you know it or not. And so it's like, are those two separate things? Is it one thing? Is it just like, is ambassador a formal program, or is it just like, come swing? Is it like more hackathon style, like just come and jam when you're interested, right? And I don't necessarily know the right answer, but I love the idea of being more transparent and having better means for feedback and for input, because more input not only means better ideas, but it means more buy-in and more help. So, and yeah, so I mean, I'm all about it. But yeah, let me give that some thought. And if any of you have thoughts after this call and want to message me privately or publicly in Slack for that matter, feel free, and would love your take on things. But thanks for what you said, Eliza. I feel like it's a game of chicken. We'll just all look at each other, see who will speak first. Maybe nobody.
All right, I have one more question. It's a little outside the community, I guess, in a way, but I just want to get your thoughts on the impact of capital coming into the space now that with COVID here, because it seemed like there was a lot of momentum, and then it's maybe slowed down a bit. Or what are you seeing, I guess?
Yeah, I'm so glad my door's locked because I hear the monsters trying to get in outside. So venture capital gets a lot of airtime relative to how big a piece of the puzzle it is. It's not a very big piece of the puzzle. It's not, you know, if you look at the total assets out there, it's a pretty small asset class, but it makes so much noise. And I kind of think the same is true in climate as well, where I think most of the noise of new blood coming in was coming from venture capital. And although it's great to see more VC coming in, they were coming in primarily, not exclusively, but primarily coming in to do the stuff they already do, but that happen to be focused here, like stuff that's capital efficient, stuff that, you know, can get big without a lot of project finance or infrastructure, or that doesn't require future policy, that doesn't have a lot of technical risk. And you know, the overlap between their stuff and the climate innovation stuff is pretty small. That doesn't mean I'm not excited about it. I mean, I come from that world, and I'm definitely, you know, I've invested in some companies that are in that overlap, and it's the one I understand the best, right? But like, whether that's there or not, I don't think necessarily makes that big a difference. I'm no expert on this other thing I'm about to say, but for example, coming out of the pandemic, you know, with the CARES Act, for example, and the fossil fuel industry getting money, and you know, what happened? You know, is the recovery going to be a recovery, or is there going to be a green recovery? Right? Like, that feels really important. And so I don't. And yeah, people worry about, like, is it going to be clean coming out? You know, like, are we going to be on the right path coming out of the pandemic? I think the pandemic did change things, but I think it's too early to say whether it changed things for the better or worse. And the reason is because it matters what we do from here. So I'm just as excited and motivated to go and do all the things I was already doing. When the pandemic first happened, I was really, I was like, do I drop everything and go focus on COVID? But I came to realize that this problem's not going away. It will remain just as urgent. And that, you know, COVID is going to come and go, and that there's people that have the expertise to focus in that area, and that's not me. And if I was starting from nothing, maybe I go and build connective tissue there. But like, I had spent the last year and a half here, and it's going so great that it was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. So yeah, that's not necessarily a direct answer, but it's as direct as I can give you, because I don't, you know, I'm not an expert, but that's how I feel.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, it's 10 past. Do we have one or two more questions, or do you think we should call it a day? All right. Well, I think that means we'll call it a day. Speak now or forever hold your peace. But I hope that this was a worthy use of time. I feel like I talked too much. That tends to happen. But if you do have input or feedback as you reflect on the things we talked about today, either the content or the format, please let us know. And otherwise, just thank you so much for caring enough to take over an hour on a Friday afternoon, if you're on Eastern time like me, or whatever time zone you're on, and invest in participating in the MCJ community. It means a lot.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Okay.
weekend.